With Leshy defeated and trapped in a card, we finally attained the ability to restart the game and learn the story of the 4 scribes. Basically, the world didn't know anything about cards until 4 scribes appeared, each with their own unique way of making them. You'll notice some of their faces are quite similar to the cards we saw in Act 1, meaning that they were effectively trapped by Leshy and turned into beasts. Let's read on together. Grimora used her quill to inscribe the epitaphs of the dead. Leshy used his wildlife camera to capture beasts. PO3 used a particle scanner to copy the CPUs of robots, and Magnificus used his brush to paint his wizard pupils. With the cards created, the scribes had solidified their power, until one day, a challenger arrived to replace one of the scribes. It's here we arrive at 4 stone monuments and can select the scribe whose deck we wish to start off with. Going through all the scribes, I decide to choose the one I'm most familiar with, Leshy, and it's here where we begin our journey. This is the entire lore of Inscryption Act 2. The map opens up where each of the areas are representative of each of the scribes. The bridge is being repaired, and it's here we meet a person by the name of Rebecca. I was surprised by this, considering that Rebecca is in an entirely different game called The Hex. It's always been of interest to me as to what made her so important so as to have the ability to travel between games. Now, a bit more detail. The Hex explored ideas of video game characters being sentient and actually treating the role of game characters as jobs. In this case, Rebecca is assigned to rebuild the bridge. One of her dialogue options is, however, very interesting. Look, you seem like a fine enough player, so I'll fill you in a bit. These scribes are crazy out here. Desperate struggle for power, you know? Just stay out of it. You don't want to end up like them. This may explain why all the other scribes seem to be trapped in the cards. Leshy had somehow attained power for a brief moment before we managed to free everyone. The question is, how did he get into power in the first place? And what is it that the scribes want? We go into Leshy's cabin where we see some familiar faces. We talk to Leshy where he is far more antagonistic towards us. He tells us to stop shaking and finds our attempt to replace him quite laughable. He gives us a replica of his camera, which we will use to make his subordinates fight us. The only subordinate I can't seem to find in this area from Act 1 is the mycologist. I wonder where he could be. The gameplay here is very interesting. Throughout each of the areas we can earn card packs and are required to build our own deck. Anyways, the subordinates refuse to fight us unless we do a favor for them. I unlock the safe using the code we find outside and give it to the hound. The prospector refuses to fight us unless we have proof that his hound is okay, so using the meat to lure the dog and taking a photo of her will give us the chance to fight him. I build my deck and we start our first fight. Gameplay works a bit differently, where the challenger you go up against has their own card, hinting at the difficulty and play style. Depending on which deck you choose, each of the scribes will explain to you how their deck works. Now, the strangest thing about all of this is that Leshy is about to explain to you how his cards work before recognizing that you understand how to play the game, and decides not to teach you the basics. This must mean that the game we are playing may have resulted in some memory loss of all the scribes. This makes sense, as the memory loss is described in Act 1 by the stink bug, when she says, "So strange. Why can't I remember his name? I believe I lost some of my memory in the flash." It could be that every reset the scribe's memories are affected. We beat the prospector quite easily before he allows us passage into his pond. Taking a photo of the bait bucket, we can attach the bait to a fishing rod, where we take a photo of a shark. But if we move through this tiny gap in the woods, we see a photo of a person just above a candle. This photo is connected to the ARG, in case you're wondering. The angler will see the photo and engage us in a battle. I die the first time, so I make the smart decision of upgrading my deck, allowing us to beat him fairly quickly. Speaking to the angler, he states he has to find fish for Leshy. He specifies that this isn't just any fish, but rather a corrupted fish he wants. What exactly is this corrupted fish Leshy is after? Does it have something to do for the attainment of power? Moving on, we reach the woods, where from a Lucky Carter video we can actually find the wood carver. To summarize everything she says, not a lot of players visit her, hinting that she's one of the few characters in game who can remember nearly all encounters even if the game is reset. She speaks of something called the old data. She refuses to speak about it, as to know it is to die. The code itself is so evil that it even managed to corrupt the game of Inscryption, perhaps explaining some of the more terrible things that happen later on in the game. The scribes, according to her, also don't care for human life. She refuses to elaborate any further on that point, and we leave her to enjoy her freedom. Perhaps it is the old data itself that the scribes need in order to gain power. We capture a rabbit using a trap, where we take a picture of its pelt. Giving this to the trapper will engage us in another fight. He uses a burrowing trap, which is a bit more difficult than the leaping frog, as it will move in front of us each time we attack. I manage to sacrifice a Frankenstein, thus allowing my grizzly to cause the remainder of the damage needed to win the round. Leshy mentions a final duel required to replace him, but before that, we must beat him in this fight. He ominously states that his camera is waiting to capture our creatures at the moment of their demise. I begin sacrificing some squirrels and he captures their costs, stats and sigils, all of which being almost non-existent. Fortunately for me, my hand is filled with only squirrel cards, which I happily sacrifice and put in the way of the opposing enemies, thus beating him fairly quickly. The light of Leshy is then activated on one of the monuments, leaving 3 left. Leshy is quite disappointed that the fight was finished so quickly, before he gives us a card pack. PO3 then enters the cabin. He mocks Leshy for losing and states, "It's no wonder we're back here again," implying that he still has some memory of Act 1. The disc of Inscryption was also apparently lost when Leshy was put into power. The question still remains, however, how did Leshy get put into power in the first place? Leshy recognizes that he pushed it too far by turning PO3 into a stoat, but he still believes to become a beast is a noble action. Going to Grimora's section of the map, we see she shares the same facial features and personality of the stink bug. She states how she was returned to her former glory with the help of some unlikely friends. It's clear that her kindness may put her on better terms with the other scribes. In order to reach her, we must first learn which of the graves matches her ghouls. To do this, we pick up pieces of epitaphs located around the area and beat the ghouls in battle. The first epitaph reads, "Eaten by a hungry dog." This probably belongs to this ghoul who is covered in a pool of water, missing half their bones and has bite marks on them. All that's left is to fight them. The name is Sawyer, and they state that the grave is the one in the middle. The next epitaph reads, "Brought down by scurvy." We can open this coffin, to which the Bone Lord is disappointed by the fact we have no offering, and returns to rest. The next ghoul is a pirate, who references food items known to combat scurvy. The name is Royal, and the tomb is the one on the right. The next epitaph reads, "Hit by a falling piece of ice." Another epitaph reads, "There was no cure." It's also here in the mirror room that we can switch to different characters. This may quite possibly be previous players who have played or beaten the game. Anyway, the "there was no cure" epitaph obviously belongs to the pirate. Picking another epitaph, it reads, "Does not hold a grudge." The next ghoul has a piece of ice lodged into their skull. Also, the name is Casey Hobbs. There's that name again. The name is referenced within the first act of the game, which Leshy remembers fondly. It appears they were born in 1970, but died in 1992. We pick up an epitaph from the well which reads, "The defibrillator failed." Well, considering that the ghoul who was half eaten could probably not be saved by a defibrillator, we can put these together fairly quickly. We then reach Grimora. She states that her minions never truly die before the battle starts, giving us a hint as to her ability. I use the Ouroboros to defeat the first enemy, and she notes down its death. She kills all of our cards and gives us corpse versions of them. They each have no attack power and 1 health, but require 0 sacrifices. Because I have the unkillable sigil, I managed to get my Ouroboros back and defeat her in 1 hit. A bit disappointing since I would have really enjoyed seeing how this could have played out, but regardless, we activate her monument. She then talks to you about your wish to replace Leshy. She asks that you spare her when the time comes, perhaps indicating that she doesn't want to be chosen. It's at this point that the battery on Luke's camera becomes so low that he needs to recharge it, allowing us to look at more videos. The first video shows Luke sending an email to GameFuna, a company who he has previously collaborated with before, and he asks if the copy of Inscryption is an elaborate prank or a genuine game made by the company. The next video shows him asking his audience for help in finding the video game copy of Inscryption. Our most interesting lead, however, is the end part when he says this.
Thank you so much, as always. And, oh yeah, what the fuck is the car?
As the video ends, the subtitles contain binary code, which upon translating it result in the words Carnoffel code. Now it's here where we push some of the gameplay aside and get a bit into the ARG. I won't be getting into specifics as to how the ARG itself was solved, but there is a document that will be put into the description should you ever be interested. How the story goes is that yes, I know. Corpse was discovered during the Cold War where a pack of cards was found on him. This was a pack of Carnoffel cards put into a specific order. The cards were discovered by Barry Wilkinson, who we can find in Act 2. He sent the code to Kaminsky, who funnily enough appears as a death card during Act 1. He hid it on a floppy disk, one of which was attained by Casey. The Carnoffel code itself is known by a few characters in the game. It may also be present in what is called the old data, which is mentioned time and time again, although whether the scribes know about its presence is unknown. Not surprisingly, GameFuna sends Luke an intimidating email from the GameFuna Happiness Department. They warn him to return the game back or they will pursue legal action. It's clear that what is in the code itself is probably very dangerous and could cause a lot of problems should it be released into the public. In this video, a woman knocks on Luke's door. She apparently came around the previous day, but Luke didn't answer. Since she's arrived again, Luke ensures he is recording the encounter. Brief binary code appears when she introduces herself, which translates to Amanda. Luke is of course concerned as to how she managed to get his address and enter the property, but he plays dumb and claims to not know about a copy of Inscryption, briefly ending the encounter. The next video contains Luke opening several card packs, one of which mentions characters and a video game series from the Hex. As a result of the day's events, however, he's unable to push himself to finish recording, and so he leaves. The final video is another error, and so we continue playing the game. We can go through a smaller segment where the cabin is and talk to the angler, who is trying out a different spot to get the supposed old fish. Speaking to Rebecca, she claims that each of the scribes has a more twisted ambition than the last. Here's what we can learn from each of them. Leshy wants to use challenges such as us as playthings, convinced that we enjoy the experiences of the game he offers us. PO3 seems to be more obscure, but he has a character called the Dredger working overtime to find the old data. Grimora wants to destroy Inscryption itself, as she's most likely seen the data that is on the disc. Whatever this data is seems to be both important and terrifying. Magnificus is the most unknown. Not a lot is known about what he wants, but Rebecca tells you that one of the theories about him is too terrible to say. The next area for us to go to is the tower belonging to Magnificus. His tower contains several strange and weird puzzles, as well as a brief identity of Kaminsky, the person who managed to help spread the Carnoffel code in the ARG. We put on the strange monocle and now have the similar ability that was shown in Act 1, allowing us to see hidden ink. In order to reach Magnificus, we must first fight his 3 graduate students. On the note we read this from are 3 sigils containing the answer to the combination of the pillar. Here we find the green slime creature from the first act. He was turned into goo for his final exam. He wishes greatly to be used as a card for his master, and constantly feels unbearable pain as a result of his state. His cards introduce us to mocks and gems. Mocks cards will usually grant their user a gem, which will help power most other magic cards. Defeating the mocks first is of course key to weakening all enemies, and it's this that helps us defeat the goo within an instant. He opens the door for us to the next floor, where in order to get the next sigil combination, we have to fight a mannequin. I receive the sigils of a skull and arm symbols. As for the last sigil, I simply brute force it. We then meet up with a student who appears to have been mangled beyond recognition, with only their head present. Perhaps Magnificus may actually be a little cruel. Maybe their goal is to turn everyone into students and put them through terrifying trials. This could quite possibly be the theory that was too unspeakable for Rebecca to mention. The next puzzle is by far the most difficult. The combination contains 3 hints. The top sigil is found by the greedy. The middle sigil is found by the pale. The bottom sigil is found by the hard of hearing, or by those who hear too easily. Following the trail on the left, we find a muck skull. Going through the options and on sound will also give us the bone sigil. I brute force the puzzle by guessing the last sigil and mixing in the other 2, and were transported to the last student, left insane and tortured as a result of sensory deprivation. It seems Magnificus is more cruel than we first thought. The fight is a little tricky, but by killing the Mox cards first, we easily get through the fight. Finally, we reach Magnificus, who stands waiting for us. A note is left on the table, which reads, "Dearest Grimora, I believe PO3's plot may go far past the extent of a common power grab. Indeed, this great transcendence will have catastrophic and unpredictable results. I urge you to consider," before the note ends. Talking to Magnificus, he states his eye aches with premonition. He can effectively sense the future. It's no wonder he had a backup plan to escape Leshy's cabin. Magnificus paints sigils on our cards, which replaces their ability. Fortunately, upon my rematch, I got a few lucky sigils and summoned my Grizzly. As my Grizzly works on the main source of gems, I distract the rest of the board with some of my attacks. With no more Mox cards left, the rest of the game becomes quite easy. This seems to have been the best play I could have made, as even when Magnificus applies sigils to his own cards, he is still incredibly defenseless. Magnificus's eye was initially cut out, an eye which conveniently has the ability of premonition. He informs us that although Leshy did this to him, there are worse scribes out there. Before he can tell us anything else, he disappears. Why does he disappear? We have no way of knowing. We can enter this part of the tower once we beat him, but this doesn't really give us much. The final area for us to go to is PO3. In his factory, PO3 tasks us with getting better robots for his production line. We do a few puzzles and make our way across where we fight the Inspector. After beating him in battle, the Inspector will throw themselves down the production line for PO3. PO3 is a leader who doesn't care for any of his subordinates' well-being, so long as it means getting his work done. The Melter is one of the more disturbing encounters. He appears to be a robot with a metal mask attached to him that prevents him from speaking his true thoughts. After beating him, he then throws himself down the line. At the bottom of the factory, we find the Dredger, a robot tasked with looking for something. With the conveyor belts connected to the water, he informs us that he cannot sacrifice himself and that PO3 will understand. Attacking him once will result in him giving up since he is so focused on his work. It's clear that PO3's task is quite important. Oh god, he's found it. He's found the old data. Slowly moving up and going through each of the processes, it begins to take shape. In our battle with PO3, he uses a conveyor belt in an attempt to confuse us. If we aren't careful, we may just end up using our own cards against ourselves. Using the Ouroboros, PO3 copies it using a scanner, and when it looks like we're in complete danger, it appears luck is on my side, and we completely break the fight. We then activate all the monuments where we are to replace Leshy, the Scribe of Beasts. But this isn't over. What about the secrets? On the right side of the map we find the Mycologist. The Mycologist shows us diagrams of several cards it requires to duplicate. These cards can be collected from packs or by buying them from the trader. At some point, they accidentally let slip that this research is being done for something far more greater. After the third encounter, they simply tell us about studying duplicates in order to attain the code. We then find a purple key which we can grab. Now, another important card is the broken obol. This card looks to be two broken sides of the same shape. Our suspicions are confirmed when using the training dummy this happens. We can then enter that area we previously couldn't access where the Bone Lord will greet us. The Bone Lord calls the obol a fine offering and opens up the coffin, allowing us to go inside. Luke reacts to the abomination that he finds. Now, based on the ARG, we can identify some things. First off, the cards on the right pocket of the jacket is a card from the game of Carnoffle. With this in mind, and with the fact that according to the ARG, was found with Carnoffle cards in his pocket, within a specific sequence. This is actually the body of himself, a perfect place for a seemingly evil creature to hide. It's unclear what he is, but some have speculated he may be the devil himself, due to his demands for sacrifice. He asks that we do not approach him unless we are willing to worship both him and the old Dada. He gives us a blue key and two powerful items, which would have been helpful 4 fights ago. Anyways, he tells us that we will meet again and we can continue to the monuments. Choosing Leshy will result in him calling us a fool, as we have effectively disrupted the cycle of life and death, to which he poetically describes it as containing excitement, death, and mystery. We confirm our suspicion of the angler being used to collect the old Dada, which according to another ARG video is what probably put Leshy into power in the first place. Leshy suspects PO3 bested him in the race for the old Dada. Instead of fighting the scribe we chose, we instead fight PO3. He summons the old Dada against us before we attack it, and this happens. PO3 has now been placed into power. We wake up and, unable to escape from PO3's grasp, are forced to play his game and help him defeat 4 Uber bots and help start the Great Transcendence.